Now, welcome everyone to this new episode of Journey Back into Self. Today we have a very special guest, someone I am lucky to call my mentor, my coach, and my friend. He's an internationally recognized author, speaker, and thought leader on the evolution of consciousness, and he's the president of the Barrett Academy for the Advancement of Human Values, and also the founder of the Barrett Value Center. I am talking, of course, of the one and only Richard Barrett. Richard, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Juan.
How are you doing this morning?
Very great. Yeah, I'm on top form.
Fantastic. Good to hear. Good to hear. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And just for you to know, in the last episode, I talked about the importance of these, philosophical questions about who we are. Of course, we discussed the ego, the fact that we're not an ego, and thinking that we are an ego is actually the cause of so much suffering in the world, and that ancient civilizations and sages have been telling over and over. And the fact that we are a soul and we don't have a soul. Now that is covered. However, today we will discuss this other question, life-defining question, that is, what are we here for in this life, in this world? So you write about this evolutionary journey of human beings, right? And tell us, what is this about, and how is that related to why we're here in the world, in this life?
Well, my belief system is that we're all souls having a human experience. And as you said earlier, we don't have a soul. You are a soul. And it's a big revelation to move from having a soul to being a soul. But that's part of the journey that we're all on, recognizing that life gets easier the closer you get to that idea. I say it's focusing on the destination. Many people are interested in spirituality, and I say that's fine because it gives you a lot of health benefits. Yoga, meditation, mindfulness, reduces stress, etc., etc. But if you focus on spirituality, you're focused on the journey, and I prefer to focus on the destination. The destination for me is living from soul consciousness, because that's who I really am. And once you're living from soul consciousness, you don't need goals anymore, because you'll be living your purpose. When you're living your purpose, goals are no longer necessary, because you surrender to the soul. The soul knows exactly what it's doing, and all you have to do is follow the impulses that you get. And setting goals can actually be limiting, because you can probably do much more than the goals that you set. So anyhow, that's just a brief overview of my philosophy.
Thank you. I love it. And also, when you talk about this concept, that I actually loved how you coined it. It's called the ego soul dynamics. It's actually your own term, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it incredibly fascinating, and also how the soul creates the ego for a specific purpose. That was one of the most amazing insights that I've gotten from your books, out of the many. So in your own words, can you explain this relationship between the soul and ego, and this dynamics, and therefore the journey that we're here to experience in this life?
Yeah. So the soul incarnates into the human fetus, or more or less at the time of conception. And after 3 months in the womb, the reptilian mind brain forms. That's the body mind. It regulates the whole body. Up to that point, this fetus the consciousness was all soul consciousness. And at that moment of the creation of the reptilian mind brain, the soul mind suddenly becomes a subconscious. I say suddenly, but gradually becomes a subconscious of the body mind, and the body mind takes over in terms of focusing on the growth of the fetus, or the embryo in the body, to a fetus. So, and in the background of that is DNA, and DNA is the coding that allows the embryo to develop into fetus, and the fetus to develop into a baby. And so by the time you're about 18 months, the soul, which comes from a plane of consciousness where it's just love and connection, begins to recognize it's in a different place where there's separation, begins to notice this separation. And for the soul, separation is very painful. It doesn't know how to deal with the separation. And so it creates this psychic buffer, which we call the ego, to protect itself from these through these thoughts of separation. Now, the ego actually does exactly the same thing if the young person, the child between 2 and 6 or 7 years old, is abused frequently, the ego will actually develop an alter ego, which again is another buffer to protect the ego. So this is this happens quite a lot. I mean, it happens in everybody's case, but the alter ego also is well known. So here we go. You know, we had a body mind, the soul became the subconscious. Then we, at the age of about 18 months or 2 years, the limbic mind brain begins to take over and develops and becomes dominant, and the body mind becomes the subconscious, and the soul becomes this unconscious. Now, around the age of 8 or 9, the neocortex, which has been growing and developing in the background, the rational mind, begins to become dominant and keeps on growing and developing until around the age of early 20s. And the brain keeps growing and developing too. So by the time we get to 22, we have a fully functioning brain, but we don't have a fully functioning brain up to that point. So that's why teenagers do really stupid things, because they don't have a fully functioning rational mind. I remember my teenage years very well. Maybe you're closer to that than I am. You know, you probably remember some of the really stupid things you did because you didn't.
I keep doing them. I keep doing them.
There you go. So obviously, brain still in development. Okay. Sure. Mind and brain still in development. Okay. Anyhow, so now what's happened is that the soul mind is going to be pushed way back into the background. So the dominant mind becomes the conscious mind, the rational mind. Then in the subconscious becomes the emotional mind, the limbic mind brain. And then the unconscious becomes the body mind. And then in the super unconscious, now we've got the soul mind. Okay. Now, from that point on, it's really about the recovery of the soul mind. Now, the ego, bless its soul, it's a funny thing to say, I know, but the ego, thinks it's in charge and develops fears about surviving, feeling safe, and feeling secure. And these during the first 20 years of your life, and these then dominate your thinking, because during that period, it's known as emergent learning. That means that your mind and your brain are growing and developing at the same time, and any experience is new and becomes hardwired. And so if you learn some dysfunctional beliefs like I don't have enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not loved enough, they will be kind of hardwired, and later on they become the fodder for psychotherapists. You know, it's like, oh yeah, my God, I have to get over this limiting belief. Anyhow, if you can reasonably master those limiting beliefs, by the time you get to your early 40s, you begin to feel the impulse of the soul. Now, the soul incarnates really to do 3 things. 1, to self-express. Secondly, to connect with other people so it can make a difference. And 3rd, to contribute to the well-being of humanity and the planet or other people.
Beautiful.
So from late 30s, early 40s, that's basically what we're all here to do. Now, if you fail to do it at that, if you fail to get to that stage, you will find you'll suffer from you'll have mental health issues. You will get yourself getting depressed because you're not living the life that your soul intended. And probably you will die young in severe cases. When you get to your mid-30s, late 30s, 40s, and you're not in alignment with your soul's agenda for you, you will get depressed. You may even get suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't see a way back. Is you're so
You know,
deep in the hole.
yeah, you're operating from ego. Now, there's nothing wrong with the ego. It's the fears of the ego that are the problem. And if you lose hope, that becomes even more problematical. So that's what you have to be very careful about.
For sure.
Now, I was just watching. Actually, I've got a book here, which is The Boy Crisis, and I was just watching a TV program last night about the young men committing suicide, and it's quite rampant
Oh,
in many countries, and it's very much worse in Northern Ireland. So they were interviewing young people, young men, late teens, early 20s, who had friends who committed suicide, and these friends you were usually very jolly people and life and soul of the party, and nobody suspected that they would commit suicide. It wasn't like they were walking around in deep depression or anything. Just one day to the next, they were gone. And these people were talking about this, and these people were suffering inside intensely and unable to make sense of the world, and yet at the same time unable to talk about it to their closest friends.
Exactly.
And of course, women don't, women have less of that, but they confide more in other women. And so the suicide rate amongst men is much higher than the suicide rate amongst women. Also, I think men in this respect are a little more courageous, if I can use that word, in taking steps to do something, but they're not very good at doing what seems to be the easiest.
Well, I guess,
and yet the easiest thing to do, and that's to talk to somebody.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess also at the same time, talk about something you don't understand. You cannot put words into it. Most people can't. Women and men, when you start discovering that you're not your ego and you get prompts from your soul, you really don't have a language for this. Either you get it or you don't, and it can be scary, it can be daunting, it can be, I'm going crazy, I have voices in my mind. Like you say always that you have voices all the time telling you exactly what to do.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Well, it's not so much a voice as a thought, I've for 15, 20 years now, I've been getting up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and having these inspirations to write books. And I was at 4:30. I was here at my computer this morning writing an article, and I just had the impulse to do it. And normally I usually go back to bed about 6:30 for an hour or so, but today I didn't. I just worked right through because I was so inspired by what I was getting and how to structure what I was getting. So it's an amazing experience, but it's a life journey. It's there are steps along the way. I call them the 7 stages of development or psychological development. And interestingly, as we speak, I published an article on that on LinkedIn 7 days ago, and as of this morning, it had 10,500 viewings.
Wow.
I know there is a thirst for understanding stages of psychological development. And I will be putting that article up on the Barrett Academy website next week when my webmaster gets back from holiday. So
just to comment on that, I'm going to make sure that on the description of the video or the episode of the podcast, I include the things you're talking about. So the link to this article, but also the book you mentioned about suicide in kids.
Well, it's an American book. I'm not sure. There's plenty of information about suicide available, and particularly the impact on young people. So you can Google that easily and get up-to-date information about what's going on in the UK on that. But I also cover it in my book, a new psychology of human well-being.
A very powerful book,
There is also, the chapter 14, I tend to it, suicide and the stages of development. So it links if you fail to master a stage of development, how seriously do you fail before you start to think about committing suicide?
Exactly. Actually, in that book, one of your heaviest books to digest, you really
Yeah.
put together something very impressive, connecting Eastern and Western knowledge, wisdom. And one thing that called my attention there is that we all, or most of us, have at certain level some kind of psychosis, some kind of is it psychosis or neurosis? I think you mentioned it. Some kind of psychological dysfunction due to the things that we lived when we were growing up in the first stages of psychological development, right, until the age of 20, 24. And these limiting beliefs that we developed are playing a role in how our mind works, and it's kind of dysfunctional. And I also love what you say that if we live our lives today and for the future based on these limiting subconscious beliefs that we developed in the past, then we're really not living fully in the present moment. We're replaying a tape that is based on something that's not real anymore.
Yeah.
I found that
Yeah.
really fascinating.
Yeah, I was talking to my good friend yesterday, who is a bit younger than me, but older than you, who had a very serious bout of mental dysfunction
Mm.
and depression. And he found somebody to help him. And he said, what this person said was, I was living in what was. I'm always living in what was. I'm not living in the present moment. And I said to him, you're really the Wizard of Was.
You always have this cheeky sayings.
Well, he totally got that, because he continues to. I mean, he's a heck of a lot better. He's doing great, actually. But that's his triggering point is around self-esteem, which it is for so many people. Which self-esteem really develops or doesn't develop between the age of 10 and 20. It also is. Issues with that can start earlier too. But anyhow, so mental health, fundamental, and we have to understand the ego-soul dynamic in order to understand mental health.
Correct. And I would like to come back to something that you mentioned once, and for me, it's one of the most poetic, beautiful things about this journey that we're all in. And it's the fact that the soul then creates the ego as a buffer to kind of survive and thrive
in this three-dimensional material world.
Correct. And now there's a point where we're already adults, right? And the soul kind of says to the ego, "Thank you, you're done. Now I take the reins of your life," right?
Right. Yeah, it's like handing over the steering wheel.
I really love that thought.
Yeah, well, I used it. He said I've used this analogy before. It's like driving a car, and when you're young, you want to get in and hold the steering wheel and drive the car, and eventually the soul really wants to take over, and that's how you're going to feel really at peace, because you're going to move from the behind the steering wheel into the passenger seat, and allow the soul to drive the car, and then you find peace. Because you have handed over, you've let go. And so there are various techniques that you can use to let go. For example, you can often you have something that happens to you in your life which feels really wrong and bad, and you're upset by it. And a year or two later, you go, my God, that was the best thing that happened to me. All right, because so you have to learn. If you can learn to chop that immediately and say everything's perfect, even when it doesn't feel perfect, you realize that actually you're letting go of the idea or the identification with that thought that is holding you back, and you will find that within a space of time, 2 months, 6 months, a year, that you'll go, wow, yeah. That was really positive, actually, what happened. But it was actually almost engineered by your soul in order to get your attention, so you could actually live the life that your soul intended. And eventually you get to the point where you just let go and let soul. Um, you know,
Let go and, and let so. I love it.
yeah, yeah. So then you become the passenger, and so eventually you get the ego jumps into the passenger seat alongside the soul, and then as you learn to really live in soul consciousness, the ego jumps into the back seat and goes to sleep.
And that's the best.
Yeah,
Then the
because that's
soul really
complete
have fun.
trust. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, and you know, I'm 37 years old, right? And I was lucky enough to have had these experiences where I started to realize that I have an ego and that there's something else right there, like just
Prodding
giving me
you.
prompts and yeah, and talking to me. I felt I was kind of crazy for many months until I started actually taking action on it. Otherwise, I would go crazy, right? And I talked about this in a previous episode of my podcast, so I'm not going to bore people with it again. However, one thing that I keep hearing from the people that get naturally attracted to me are mostly women, but also men, young adults, let's say, up to 40 years old, but mostly between 25 and 35. They get naturally attracted to what I have to give, to offer. And one of the things that I see in common all the time is that how difficult it is if you start listening to these prompts, if you start realizing that you're not the ego, that you have an ego, and that you're a soul, is that, wait a second, I built my whole life, all my goals, all my project, this vision that I had, like, for example, I had this vision of a Manhattan apartment with windows from top to bottom, having expensive wines and dressed amazingly, being a director of marketing in a big company and earning, a lot of money. I guess most of the people that I work with have this kind of feeling of what life is, what success is, all these definitions, right, that are potentially limiting. And then suddenly, if you start listening to this, either because I'm boring them with stories or you're boring them with stories, or because they get it themselves, it's very scary. Now, basically, you need to throw everything you knew to the garbage and start living a life that is more basic, where desire, is not leading your life, and just feeling good and making decisions out of values and feeling good. It's a completely different paradigm.
Absolutely. It's a completely different worldview too. See, most of we you see what you've been describing is, people grow up inside a worldview, and in order to be successful in that worldview, you have to do certain things, and the things that and this is what your parents tell you, your teachers tell you: get a good job, get a house, get a car. It's like, okay, and when I've done all of that, I'll get the good life. But actually, you get all that, and you just find life is empty. It's really empty, and because you've got now to your mid 30s, early 40s, and you think, well, so what? I'm just like everybody else, and I've got this impulse to find meaning and purpose in my life.
Mm.
And actually, in my case, I was a reached the top of my career as a transportation engineer, working at the World Bank. I was in my early 40s, and I realized I was absolutely bored. It just hit me. Totally bored with my career. And I thought, well, what the hell am I interested in? And I realized I'd been reading all the books on psychology that I could find. And I realized I'd been living a misspelt life. I was really interested in transformation, not transportation.
So that's also something that you had. You wrote about this moment in a specific speech that you were giving somewhere, or a workshop, right? That you have this realization. How was that?
Well, that was about 3 years ago. Well, actually, I mean, all of that happened many years ago, but that particular piece, living a misspelled life, was somebody said to me about 2.5 years ago. I was with a group of people on a Greek island, mostly Scandinavian people, but there was two of my friends from Serbia, and the wife of my friend, very bright. She says, "Yeah, you've been leading a misspelled life," and I thought, "Wow, that is so funny." But yeah, I mean, that was true. I mean, I don't regret anything up to the age of 40 because it set a context for me, which was global. I was working in the World Bank. I was working all over the world. By the time I was early 40s, I'd been to nearly 80 or 90 different countries.
Mm.
It gave me that global outlook.
Mm.
And that was absolutely necessary for the work that I do now.
That's actually one of the most powerful exercises in coaching, or whatever you want to call this. But there's an exercise where at some point of your life, you look at your life, at your past, and you start giving another meaning to all the little or big events that have taken you where you are today, right? So far, because it's on our memories somewhere stored, we just never thought of it. And it's just things that happened. And probably we store them with a negative connotation, a negative meaning or interpretation, right? Like, yeah, my father was rude to me in my whole life. I never got the love that I needed from my father. Or that moment with this person broke up with me, this important relationship that I had that really marked me in a bad way. But if you look back and you choose to give it whatever meaning you choose, but also connect the dots, you start seeing a pattern, right?
Yeah.
And that it shouldn't have been any other way. It couldn't have been any other way. And it puts you in the right place at the right time, uniquely positioned to do something that only you can do in this world.
Absolutely. I'll tell you another story. Going back to my early teens, I was a prefect at school. I was very shy, and one of the jobs of the school prefect was to read the Bible lesson in front of the whole school. And I used to make up every excuse and tell my parents I was sick when the day I had to do that. I'd do anything to get out of it. I could not speak in public. And I realized this was a problem when I left school. And so I did a bit of speaking classes. And then I remember some 15 years later, one of my, I don't know, 20 years ago now, I got invited to speak at this conference with 10,000 people in the audience. And so just before I went on the stage, I closed my eyes and centered myself and said to myself, I said to my soul, it's showtime, time for you to show up. And just walked out and did it and nailed it completely.
Beautiful.
But you see, because I just got out of the way.
Beautiful.
But I'm relating it back to what you said. Sometimes the handicaps or the difficulties we have in childhood are the things that spare us forward and have a big impact in our life later.
Correct.
I've heard that so many times from people.
Correct.
And that's what you were just saying.
Yeah, you trigger me this beautiful story about the caterpillar, the man trying to help the caterpillar. Did you know that one?
Well, I don't know. Until you tell me, I won't know.
Well, here he goes. Prepare. So there's a caterpillar, right, doing its old process of transformation in the cocoon. And this guy comes along, he looks at the caterpillar, and you see inside this insect, beautiful butterfly, trying to get out, struggling, right, inside. And he says, well, I'm going to help her. This is terrible. It's suffering. I'm going to help her. I'm going to alleviate her how do you say that? The struggle, let's say. And he opens the cocoon. Now, of course, the butterfly, half mature, spreads her wings, beautiful, but still not strong enough, starts to fly and falls to the ground and dies. Because it cannot fly, it cannot eat, it cannot hunt. So the conclusion of the story is that these struggles that we have, we need to go through them. Those are the ones that create the muscles, metaphorical, but also literal muscles, to deal with the path that we need to move in life. So
there's more to that story. There's more to that story.
Oh yeah?
Oh yeah. Because as a coach, you have to be careful that you don't do what that person did. You're there to support the process, not to interfere with the process.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Your story is about interfering and it fails. Correct. So you have to hold back and you have to be there as a support, keeping that cocoon warm, whatever is necessary to allow the emergence, not to force the emergence. You can't force emergence on anybody.
Allow the emergence. I love that one. Nice.
Allow the emergence. Don't force it. Just, I've given you feedback over the last year or two, and some of it was a bit, kicking the pants type feedback. But it was only when I judged it was necessary to get your attention. But the rest of the time, it was just presence, just being there.
Yeah. Yeah. Very loving presence, by the way. Thank you for that. So circling back then to this journey, right? And the ego soul dynamics. And the fact that the soul then creates the ego to survive and thrive in this first stages of life. Then what I want to give people is that realization that the moment that they start recognizing their soul and befriending, also like you say, the soul, connecting with the soul, trusting the soul, there's a point where if you do that, because it is difficult, it is challenging.
Yeah, it is.
If you do that, then the party starts, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, that's when you begin to really move into high gear and find a deep sense of peace and meaning in life. I was just remarking this last few months. I'm getting, I get things that I have to do, and I'm getting them done in record time, and I get to lunchtime and I go, okay, I've done everything I was going to do today. What am I going to do now? And it's because everything's accelerated, because everything's easy. Every now and again you have a little bit of a struggle, but mostly it's easy, it just flows. So you're living in a field of love which enables synchronicity to happen. Synchronicity is souls talking to each other and then showing up in your life. And it's like magic. It's like mysterious and it's magic, but it's actually how the fourth dimension, energetic dimension, works. It's how souls work. And it's not magical at all. It only seems magical because we don't understand it. But once you understand the ego soul dynamics, you realize that is actually what life is about. And all of this three-dimensional material stuff is like nonsense. All of this, what you see going on in the world is mostly all about ego-driven stuff. I mean, for millennia, and including now. I mean, it's just, most people are absolutely unconscious.
Yeah, it's just another manifestation of ego today. Maybe more sophisticated, more with more luxury, but it's still based on your seven level model. It's just the first three levels.
Yeah, in the Roman and Greek times, it was all about power, and we still have people like Donald Trump who are living that. And then came the monotheistic religions, and it became about knowledge and education. That was the pathway to success. And then after that came science and wealth awareness, and that became our pathway to success. And that's what most of the modern generation are still living in. And we need to move beyond that into something called people awareness, and then beyond that into humanity awareness. And again, you can find out more about Humanity Awareness Initiative on the website by the same name. Perhaps you'll mention that also.
Yeah, I will put the link on the description.
Great.
Yeah, and correct, huh? And so it's a more sophisticated level of consciousness that we achieve first as individuals. And when enough individuals achieve that level of consciousness, then of course society or the community also
changes,
raises and changes the worldview, the consciousness level. And something that also you say always that I completely love, one of my favorite ones, is that how was it? I was so inspired by it that I forgot it.
I knew that was going to happen. It happens to me too.
Well, let's
we'll do another podcast when you remember.
For sure. Oh yeah, no, thanks. This is lovely. When you just let go, we let soul, because it just came to me again. Thank you. Being the best in the world versus being the best for the world.
Yeah.
And I completely get this in my life because I always modeled my oldest brother, and my father, and I just learned these beliefs about life and what success and what you should do. And it's basically, you summarize it very nicely. I was trying to be the best in the world, and I still am many times. Of course, it's difficult to catch my ego all the time, but and now this consciousness transformation that I've been going through in the last years, I really feel what you say, that I'm trying to be the best for the world, for the team that I'm working on, for the people I work with. It's just a different dynamic, completely different.
Right. Because you've evolved your level of identity to include other people.
Love that. Yes. So I would like to invite people to do the personal values assessment. The personal values assessment is an assessment that Richard created a while ago now, and millions of people have filled this in. Around
1.3 million.
1.3 million have filled it in. It's amazing. It was one of the first things that I did to measure my, let's say, in a way, my consciousness. Because it measures your values, what's important for you, right, Richard?
Yeah.
If you can say something about that, but before that, I will put the link to the personal values assessment on the description. That is hosted on my website, Happiness Coaching Studio /PVA, from Personal Values Assessment. And here you go. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, you basically, it takes about 5 minutes. You go online and you have a list of words, and you pick the 10 values or behaviors which most represent who you are, not who you desire to become, but the ones you most resonate with. You just pick 10 words out of about 50 or 60. Now, each one of these words links to a level of consciousness. So, for example, if you pick financial stability, it links to the survival level. If you pick creativity, it links to the 5th level, self-expression, and so on. So you pick 10 words, and that's it. Done. And then you push the button with your email address, and 2 minutes later, you get a report. And it shows you which values you've chosen, what levels of consciousness they belong to, and you get a description of who you are. Now, people find that description is automatically generated, but people find it extremely insightful in terms of, wow, that really is me. I mean, we've had people do this who don't know anything at all about the, grandmothers and people who are just friends of friends who have tried it out, and it works for everybody.
It does.
Because it gives you a deep insight. Now, one of the things you get some other materials with the result about how to play with, or how to examine what the result, and people find this quite interesting. So that's something I would recommend that you can do, and as I say, it's in many languages. It's in 40 or 50 different languages, so it's easy to do, no matter where you are in the world.
Correct. And I guess the power of this assessment lies not only in all the background behind it, your 7-level models of consciousness and psychological development is just so beautiful and powerful. But at the same time, the simplicity of the assessment, like you said, it just takes a couple minutes. And then the richness that you get in the report is fantastic. So go ahead, guys, do the assessment. And maybe we'll start getting at the end of the podcast of the episode. Most people listening to this now and in the future will be probably young adults. People that are either starting their careers or already deep into their careers, but still having these big questions like I had them at some point, which is, what is life and what am I? Is this all? No, I achieved the money that I wanted, the salary that I wanted, and still I have this void inside. What should I do? Who am I? And so what is the last message that you would like to give these struggling personal development junkies out in the world?
Very simple. There has been a study by Harvard University, which has been going on for nearly 80 or 90 years. It started in 1945, and they decided to interview a cohort of 200 or 300 graduates every year or every other year, do deep depth interviews and follow the evolution of all of these people. And after a lifetime, basically 80 odd years, they analyzed all the results. I mean, it's the longest study ever, longitudinal study ever done. And so what they wanted to find out, well, what leads to a successful and happy life? And it was just one thing. And I'm going to tell you what it is, because it's really important. It's
Please do.
it's the quality of your relationships. That's it. Nothing else. It's love and the quality of your. That is what leads to a happy, healthy life. From Harvard University, the quality of your relationships. So, I remember this is something that I told you at one point. It's like people can get very focused on their job and finding meaning and purpose through their work, but you must not let go of your accountability and responsibility to your family and to your spouse and to your children. It's so easy, particularly for men, to get really absorbed in meaning and purpose and forget that to be well-rounded. And you see, all of your relationships are important. I mean, souls don't incarnate just to do meaning and purpose. They do it to form, to live the life that they live in the fourth dimension of energetic awareness, which is a life of connectedness. And therefore, it's not surprising to me that the result of this long-term study is a happy and successful life is built on high-quality relationships.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And it makes me think, if I focus only on my mission in life, on finding meaning, do meaningful stuff. Now, one thing is that I might not succeed if I do it isolated from other people. And even if I succeed, probably it's going to be meaningless. It's going to feel empty.
Because you're not having any impact on the rest of the world.
Correct.
You see, meaning and purpose comes from aligning with what your gifts and talents, but your gifts and talents are there for other people. That's why they're gifts.
Yeah.
And everybody has gifts and talents. And if you want to lead a happy life, you have to figure out what those are and then spend some time doing that, working on that. Correct. And that's why work is so important. The transformation you've been going through recently is like, okay, you're beginning to realize that meaning and purpose were important to you, but you also realize that the work you were doing didn't give you a sense of meaning and purpose. And that created this slight depression, crisis, whatever you want to call it.
Correct.
Like a self-correcting mechanism, like, now if you hadn't listened to that, you'd be going deeper and deeper into this hopelessness.
Correct. This feedback mechanism, this communication mechanism that hopefully out there, if you're listening to this and you feel related to any of this, instead of perceiving these emotions that you're having, these crises, like Richard mentions, instead of seeing this as something negative, remember what Richard said, what we talked about. A year or some months from now, you're going to look back and you're going to say, this needed to happen. This made me strong. And maybe you're going through right now. You don't have to wait months. Just remember, this is a communication mechanism from your body. Something is not right.
So let me underline that with one sentence, okay? Pain is positive.
Beautiful.
Pain is positive because it tells you exactly where you need to look in order to solve the problem. If you've hurt your knee, you don't go into a hospital and say, my back hurts. No, you point to your knee and you go, and then they know where to look and what to do. Now, emotionally, it's the same thing. When you're in emotional pain and mental pain and physical pain are linked to the energy field of the body. Same thing, actually. So you're in mental pain, look at it and say, wow, okay, this is what I need to work on in order to get this pain to go away. So welcome pain, because it's helping you figure out what you need to do.
Yeah, I love it. You can even have a conversation with it, right? Pain.
Yeah.
What do you want to teach me? What are you trying to tell me?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Especially, and going back to that more Eastern philosophy part of your work and your studies, which I'm also a fan of, something manifests in this 3D material world, call it your body or even your, let's say, certain sensations that you have, call it depression, stress, anger. When it manifests at this level, it's a little bit too late. There's an imbalance, an energetic level before that you haven't paid attention to. And it's difficult. Right. Most of us don't. But then the first level of that we can become conscious of, it's the emotional level. If you feel anything that is life depleting, like anger and stress or sadness, that's the first line of communication. There's something that is not right.
Irritation, impatience, anything that disturbs your equilibrium.
Correct.
That's why that's a sign you need to look at something.
Correct.
Because you see, because you, Juan, can't upset me. I can only upset myself by the way I interpret what you say. You can say you're a bloody so-and-so and call me all the names and it won't upset me unless I have a belief about that. And then we always upset ourselves, basically, because we are triggered by what other people say.
I love what you're saying right now. It really triggers a memory in Chile, where I used to live. I was 15 years old. 15, 16. I was walking on the street, and what you need to know is that Chileans, in general, there's an animosity towards Argentinians, and that's where I come from, Argentina. It's like a rivalry, right? Like Argentina has it with Brazil.
The English and the French.
Exactly, and the Dutch and the German, and probably.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they kind of have this, strong reactions, and any chance they get to say something and to make you feel that they take it. And that was 17 years of my life in Chile. But when I was starting there, I was very young, and I didn't have any self-control, self-regulation techniques or anything. And my thoughts were my reality, of course, like anyone else's, right? So in the street, a couple guys come, and they say, one of them says, he hears my accent and says, "You freaking Argentinian, get the hell out of here. Go to your country." And blah, blah, blah. Of course, more strong words, huh? And up to this point, I would react very aggressively, of course, pick a fight or something like that, even though I would lose every time. And but a couple of years later, something like this happened again. And I remember there was something very different. And that was the person said this, and I said to the person, "Wow, clearly you have strong emotions about Argentinian people. How many Argentinians do you know? How many do you know?" And it says, "Well, of course, silence." "Yeah, and do you know me?" "So what makes you say that?" I'm really fascinated and curious. That was, I think, the first moment in my life that I showed some maturity and some perspective in my thought process. And that person was so crazy about the fact that he couldn't say anything back, and he was realizing that his anger was completely out of base and he shouldn't have done that. And at the end, what happened is an outburst of, "Oh, get out of here," whatever, and he left. But probably that night, that person thinking like, "What the hell happened there?"
Exactly. Very good. Excellent. And you nailed it by the word curiosity. So when somebody gets upset with you, be curious.
Yeah.
You must be having a bad day today. What's going on with you? Rather than just taking it personally.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, okay. I haven't done anything, so this person must be having a bad day. I'm very curious as to why they're having a bad day. Why are you shouting at me? What needs do you have that are not being met? That's the key. What needs have you got that are not being met?
Yeah. Believe me, I used that with my wife lately, and it works like a charm. That moment, all the anger goes down because really I'm addressing what she needs.
Yeah.
I just say it more simply. I just say, "Darling, what do you need right now?" And everything goes down. Takes a deep breath and says, "I need you to listen more. I need you to," whatever it is. And then you realize that the need was not being communicated explicitly. And
exactly.
It's actually only fair. What they ask is only fair. It's basic, and everyone should get that. So when that happens, all my own ego and all my willingness to fight or to defend my position goes down, because it all comes down to basic human values like fairness and justice and equality. And you cannot just deny that. If you do, well, you have a lot of personal development ahead of you. But if you ask that question, it changes the whole dynamic of a conversation. Thank you, Richard, for putting it out there. And wow, Richard. And when it comes to consciousness, if you have one advice for people out there, so you said the advice of relationships, right? And when it comes to the development of consciousness, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I think could be lots of different things, but first of all, understand what stage of development you're at, because when each stage of development has specific needs, and if you know what your needs are, you can be explicit in asking for them. And that's so it's about self-knowledge, really. And you've just been transitioning from one stage of development to the next. You had certain needs, and now you've got other needs, and that actually colors everything you do. This is what I need right now. And you can, in my book on evolutionary coaching, you can find out, and in my articles, which you'll be find on the website, you can find out what stage of development you're at, roughly by the age, by the season of your life, and therefore what it is that will bring you a sense of well-being. What needs do you have that bring you a sense of well-being? Okay, I guess that's about it.
Beautiful, beautiful, Richard. I want to really thank you, because we are reaching the end of the episode. And once again, your generosity has no comparison. Maybe this is something I never told you, but I've been a personal development junkie for many years. And in the last years, through LinkedIn, I've reached out to many of the people that I admired, that I read their books. And you have been the only one that not only just replied maybe once for being kind, but you stayed there and you've been present and you've been actively supporting, congratulating, whatever it is, you've been there every time I wrote to you. And that speaks of the kind of person you are, the kind of soul you have as well, or the kind of low thickness that your ego has. So thank you for that. Thank you for inspiring us with your knowledge and experience. And for all of you out there, thanks for tuning in. And we really hope with Richard that you enjoyed today's special episode and that you took some great insights for your own journey into consciousness. Blessings to you all. Richard, once again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Bye, Richard.
Farewell, my friend.
Or until the next time our souls connect.
They're always connected.
Oh, you keep puzzling me.